Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire side that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. With me is, for the second time this week, as we go back to a regular show schedule, is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and this is our preview picks and prop bets show. We bring it back after last season. Lots of off-season stuff. We're officially back in. We had our first show of the week earlier. I did the preview show, the opponent preview show with Bills Wire Nick Wooten. That episode went up Thursday afternoon, or Thursday morning rather, and then this one will drop on Friday, as we are recording Thursday night, just as the Kansas City Chiefs and Baltimore Ravens are wrapping up their season opener with less than a minute left, and the Ravens are down by 7. But here we go, Seth. We got the Cardinals and Bills playing this weekend. We don't know what we can. There's not much we can say, right? We didn't see the Cardinals do anything in the preseason. The Bills were kind of the same boat. They didn't really play their starters, and so it's going to be sight unseen. And so there's not much we can talk about what they're going to do other than what we think the Bills are going to do offensively, right?
Yeah, and it's tough with, out Stephon Diggs. Keon Coleman's the guy. I mean, I know we're going to get into prop bets as we get into this, but like you look at things like receiving yards or player total receptions, right? And Dalton Kincaid is the guy at number 1 for them. Like, and don't get me wrong, he's not a bad player by any means, but I mean, you're talking about Dalton Kincaid and like Curtis Samuel as their main threats. So we'll see how that goes. Their running game has always been so heavily reliant on Josh Allen to allow their running backs to have success. So you look at it, James Cook, his over under, and whatnot, like all of those things kind of tell you that they expect a shootout. I mean, I think the over under was sitting at 46.5 as we start the show, 47.5 now. So it's just one of those situations that I think you look at it and we don't really know what to expect, except Vegas expects kind of an offensive explosion, right?
Yeah, it seems like it might be that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because you don't have, and this is when I was talking about Nick on the show, is we don't know what to expect from the passing game other than I guess it's going to be kind of the Cardinals passing attack structure, kind of how they went last year, because we've seen Josh Allen without Stephon Diggs. And it wasn't special, was it?
No, but I mean,
back a few years before that, he was a good quarterback, but he was far more erratic. He didn't have those special numbers like when Kyler added DeAndre, when Allen had Stephon Diggs, when Burrow added Jamar Chase. It took those quarterbacks up to the next stratosphere.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's pretty universal that people think Josh Allen's a top 3 quarterback in this league. He's drugged some of these teams, these Bills teams along, and so anytime you're facing Josh Allen, it's it's going to be a tough road to hoe. But overall, I mean, it's one of those situations where this whole matchup is just tough because, for the Bills, you look at who their starters are, right? And their offense is Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir was there last year, right? But
the only receiver on the roster to have caught a pass from Josh Allen previous to this year.
Right. And so that's tough. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball, and they have the makings of some talent, but they're without their leader. I mean, just the guy that kind of makes everything go in Matt Milano, who I think, did he tear his bicep? I don't. It was something.
Yes. So he's out. He's on injured reserve until at least 4 weeks. But we'll see if he.
And then their entire secondary. Their entire secondary changed, and that went from being, I think they called them the twins in the back, Jordan Poyer and
Micah Hyde, and they had Tre'Davious White.
And Tre'Davious White, and now it's, DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, who we're familiar with, and Rasul Douglas, who we're kind of familiar with, but and
yes, for two reasons, because the Cardinals didn't bring him up from the practice squad, and then he goes to Green Bay, and then he ruins the Cardinals season essentially.
And so, it's just one of those situations where you look at it, and it's an interesting game, because it's not, there's like really nothing that we know heading into this game about really either team. Like, we have ideas of what they can be, what they could be, maybe what we think they should be, but we just don't have any concrete evidence of what they are.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But so in terms of that, instead of talking about what the Bills do, they've got a great defense. They've had a great defense for years now. It's changed on the back end. They still have Ed Oliver. They still have DaQuan Jones. They still have Greg Rousseau. But let's talk about what then the keys to this game for the Cardinals. The keys to and this is different than last year, it feels like, because we're not saying the keys to not embarrassing. That we think that the Cardinals have a chance. Like, we're not going into this game as a no chance game. It's an unlikely win, but we feel like the Cardinals could go into Buffalo this weekend and pick up a win. I don't personally, we'll talk about the pick. I don't predict that will happen, but I think the Cardinals are going to make a statement. I would like to think that they can make a statement with how they play. And so let's talk about what the kind of the key things here are. And the one thing I'm going to point to, and this kind of goes with most things, but the last 2 years, Josh Allen has thrown 5 interceptions in season openers. That is what opens the door. If the Cardinals can force him to turn over, if they can get more than one turnover, so let's say whether it's 2 interceptions, an interception and a fumble, that I think right there, getting at least one turnover and not getting 2, I think kind of changes things. That becomes that key stat, is that if they can make Josh Allen do what he is known for, when that poll came out saying that he's the most overrated quarterback in the NFL, and that included an NFC West player, who knows if it was a Cardinals player or not, saying he just turns the ball over too much. I think if the key number one is take the ball away from Josh Allen, force at least a turnover from him.
Yeah, and you've got to force the issue in the sense of, like, again, we don't know anything about this wide receiver corps, right? Like, we don't really, Khalil Shakir is in year 3, maybe 4. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm checking right now, fact checking myself as we go. Year 3, right? And 39 catches for 611 yards. It's not bad, but 2 touchdowns in his career. Like, it's, wide receiver 3 numbers. We're comparing a guy to, and no shot at either of them, but like Greg Dortch, right? Like a Greg Dortch level guy. So, that's the only guy that we really have any information for. And like you said, Allen is fantastic. So I don't want anybody to think I'm not thinking that he is. But at the same time, when you look at, beginnings of seasons like you talked about, Jess, I mean, last year, they lost to the New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers snapping his Achilles in the first 5 seconds of the game.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
And not just that, he was sacked five times. You mentioned, the year before they blew out the Rams, but threw 2 interceptions, sacked 2 times. I mean, go back even further, Jess. The year before that, he didn't throw any interceptions, but he was sacked 3 times. Go back the year before that, sacked 3 times. Like, this is a guy who, in opening days, he hasn't played poorly by any means. He's an incredibly talented quarterback. But at the same time, he hasn't gotten the support, and it seems like it takes, a game or 2 for them to get their feet wet and really get their bearings before they're able to really take off and get going offensively. So that's one thing. The other thing is, like you said, there's just so many questions about this defense that Sean McDermott has had as one of the better. I mean, like you said, 4th in points against. They were 9th in yards last year. So, I mean, we're talking a top 10 defense in stats. 2nd in points against the year before that, 6th in yards. Like, this is a dominant defense. 3rd in points against, 1st in yards. Like, the last 3 years they've been fantastic, but again, the turnover, the name differences, Jess, you have to go after this team and understand that this is not this. The scheme is the same. I think you and I would agree with that, but we can make fun of Jordan Phillips all we want. He was a good player for them. Leonard Floyd was a disruptive player, 10.5 sacks last year. You look at the linebackers we talked about. They've got no Matt Milano, who is one of the better linebackers in the NFL. They're starting Dorian Williams and Dorian Williams and I don't even know who their other starting linebacker is, if I'm being completely honest with you. Last year, it was Tyrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard with Milano. And we talked about, I think you and I talked about Dodson as a free agent this offseason, right? Like, he was a nice player. I think he re-signed in Buffalo. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this comes out. And then, like we talked about, the secondary is like completely night and day. How do they come out? How do they play under these new, with this new defense that, again, 4th in points, 9th in yards. Like, it started to go downhill last year, and now this year, it's completely different. And then even along the offensive line, I mean, they moved Connor McGovern to center.
Yeah, they have that offensive line, which was real stable last year. It's a little bit different this year.
Yeah. So Spencer Brown, who was their right tackle to start the season, is now their right guard. The right side's still the same. It's the left side that changed. Yeah, McGovern moved to center. David Edwards came over from the Rams, and he's going to be the starter now. I mean, he was okay for the Rams feel like they upgraded, right? Going to get Jonah Jackson and I can't remember who the other guy was, and then Deion Dawkins is good. I mean, I think you and I can agree with that. Like, he's a good player, but this is just a different look than what we've seen from them. Like you said, there's Khalil Shakir is the only guy that's caught passes from Josh Allen. It's a real new look, and we're going to see if the Cardinals can exploit that.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. And we get to the props. There's one that I really kind of like now. Another key, I think, especially, and it's related to that passing game. because the receiving core isn't. It kind of feels like the Cardinals receiving core last year, in a way, because you have no real number one, and that's how the Cardinals played down the stretch. Dalton Kincaid's their number one guy, so I'm like, the key is limit Kincaid, and with Kaiser White, with Zaven Collins, however they end up covering him, I think they have the guys who they played pretty well last year against tight ends in general, and so
and you mentioned Kaiser, right? Like, I don't know if you've been following along with the Kyle Odegaard campaign about just how good he was last year, right?
So good last. Like, I mean, just as the leader of the defense, the physicality, the violence with which he played, but we also know he moves really well. He's good in coverage.
And so you've got a guy that, when they lost him, it really, I mean, and again, we knew this wasn't a good defense by any stretch of the imagination, but you kind of took away the physicality, the leader, the only guy familiar with the defense. And it's just, now we'll see how they have him. They feel confident with Mac Wilson. Like you said, this is a different unit up front to attack a team that we have a lot of question marks about their receiving corps.
Yeah. And so limiting Kincaid will then force plays that way. And then, of course, I mean, I think it also basically goes up front. James Cook was the focal point of their offense. Stay strong against, I don't know if we're going to, after what the Cardinals allowed to running backs last year in general, they were atrocious. Not, keep Cook under 100 yards, and then James Conner. The Cardinals have played this way. They need to be successful running the ball, and they need to limit James Cook, because like last year, running backs just absolutely, roasted. They absolutely cooked the Cardinals last year. We saw running back after running back after running back have big games.
Yeah, and they spent a good amount of their cap space in free agency on bringing in, new starting defensive linemen, and Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, and then obviously we mentioned Mac Wilson, right? So like
Kyrus Tonga, who made the team in part because Darius Robinson got hurt.
Right. And so this front seven now, outside of Dennis Gardeck, is really, I mean,
you feel strong against the run.
I was gonna say they're built more to stop the run. We still want to see who's gonna step up as a pass rusher, but like they're built to stop the run.
Yeah, that'll be a good thing. Any other particular keys that you see will be important in this game?
I mean, the interesting one is going to be like, how do the Bills match up with what we hope is a plethora of Cardinals weapons? One of the things last year about the Bills, and they were a fantastic team, fourth in points against, ninth in yards, but they weren't great against the run. But when you're a team that's always ahead, right, it's not hard when you can't stop the run, and their opponents average.
That's what we said about the Cardinals in 2021.
Right.
Their best run defense was their offense, was scoring points.
Right. And you look at it, and it was, they were 15th in yards allowed, so average, but 28th in yards per attempt allowed at 4.6 yards per carry. And one of the things we know about the Cardinals, and again, we haven't seen a ton with Kyler, with Petzing at the helm, but we know that even if they're down 14, they're gonna run the football, right? Like they're not super worried.
I wonder if that'll change a little bit more this year.
Yeah, and maybe it will, but I mean, last year we saw that, and when you have a team that you look at it last year, 172 yards against the Jets, right, in game one, 142 yards, and these are rushing yards allowed, against the Dolphins, 196 yards against the Jaguars, 132 yards against the Giants, 122 yards against the Broncos, 185 yards against the Eagles, 103 yards against the Patriots, 108 yards against the Dolphins. And then in their 2 playoff games, it was 106 yards against the Steelers and 146 yards in their loss to the Chiefs. And all those games kind of have one thing in common. If you kind of go through them, right? Like they didn't lose. They lost all those games that I mentioned with 100 yards plus. They lost. So those were their 4 losses, sans the Patriots loss, which was just they played really, really poorly that game. But if you look at the other games, 103 yards to the Patriots, they won 27-21. 108 yards to the Dolphins, they won 21-14. 132 yards to the Giants, they won 14-9. Like those games were all close. And part of the reason is because when you can run the ball effectively, what do? Well, you take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, right? Like you've got this magician that's, obviously not Patrick Mahomes, and I don't, Bills fans, if you listen to this, I don't mean any shade. Obviously never going to be Patrick Mahomes. Unfortunately, he played in the era of Patrick Mahomes and will end up in his shadow, but he is in his own right incredible. And you limit his touches, and that's the only way you're going to have a chance to win games.
Absolutely. Coming up next on the Res Receiver podcast, Special Cardinals Talk on the Web, this we have to talk about individual matchups. What are the matchups we're looking for in this game? That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. Back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Special Cardinals Talk on the Web. We're at the key part of our preview where we look at matchups. And we alluded to one because one of the keys is to limit Dalton Kincaid. I think we're going to have to look at the matchup of Kaiser White versus Dalton Kincaid is one of those things. And I think it's not just him. The Cardinals will defend the tight ends. It depends on how they use him. I'm sure Zaven Collins will get some looks. You might get a little bit of Garrett Williams and Jalen Thompson, Budda Baker. But I think it's going to come to Kaiser, especially, and Mac Wilson, especially if Kincaid ends up in the middle of the field.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big thing, right? Like you have to contain the middle of the field against Josh Allen. And it's hard. I mean, it's not an easy situation. And it's why he is so effective as a player. I mean, he's just so talented for that reason, because it's easy to say like, hey, if you do this, you win the game, right? Like, okay, cool. Like that's all you got to do against Josh Allen. But you look at his numbers in the middle of the field, right? And especially that intermediate middle of the field, his quarterback ratings, 105, which is incredible. And in fact, in the intermediate part of the field, that 10 to 19 yard range, in every quadrant, his NFL ratings over 104. Like that's where he thrives. And so the Cardinals are going to have to be able to control the middle of the field, but also that mid level of the field, especially in their zone play. They run so much zone, so they're going to have to be aware and do a good job of passing off and being able to get those guys covered. But again, we don't know, again, there's no Gabe Davis. I mean, there's no, there's no Stephon Diggs. Like these are going to be new guys. So are they going to be as in tune and effective as those guys before them were? And that's going to be a big part of the game. You shut down the intermediate passing game. You force them to throw deep and short, and you really take away the effectiveness and what makes Josh Allen great. But again, it's really easy to talk about. It's not very easy to do. Yeah, just do this. Nobody else has done it, and you beat Josh Allen, right? Like it's the easiest pie.
If we're looking at another one for the defensive side, I'm looking at not Josh Jones, but Justin Jones against David Edwards, assuming because Justin Jones is listed as the right defensive tackle. We'll see how much he plays on that right side, which would line up against the center and the left guard. I'm interested there for a couple reasons, because Jones is a well-established good run defender. He also showed some pass rushing chops last year for the first time. And with the absence of a clear threat on the edge, you need guys from all over doing that. And so, especially what might be considered a weakness on that Bills offensive line, if you line up Justin Jones in there, I want to see how he does against that left interior of the Bills offensive line.
Yeah, and it's going to be, a full team effort when you play Josh Allen. This is something we've talked about before with, Jalen Hurts type of thing. And obviously he's not the runner in the sense of how often, but he is just as effective when he chooses to run. And, the 6'5", 230 pounds behind it makes it really tough. I mean, again, this is a guy that last year ran for 15 touchdowns. I mean, it's hard to stop him. And so if you're going to take advantage of somebody, like you said, David Edwards, how can you put pressure on Osiris Torrance, their right guard? And that's on Jones and Bilal Nichols. And you don't want to go too much into the game going like, hey, earn your contract. But at the same time, it's like, hey, they paid you. Probably
the Jones contract was, they paid him like a guy that wasn't just a run stuffer.
Right. And they paid you a little more than was expected. So, show people that they were right, and that everybody that kind of was like, I'm not sure about that contract, or was wrong, right?
Yeah. On the other side, the fun thing, I'm sure everyone is going to be watching this, both Bills fans and Cardinals fans. It looks like the matchup against Marvin Harrison will probably be Rasul Douglas. That will be a fun matchup. Rasul Douglas, who is both a good cornerback and a journeyman at the same time, but has kind of had a resurgence, in his career since the Packers picked him off the Cardinals practice squad a couple years ago. But he will probably draw that number one assignment against Marvin Harrison. So we'll get to see how the rookie does against the grizzled veteran there.
Yeah, and my biggest one is going to be like watching Greg Rousseau. He has, he's starting to blossom into a really talented pass rusher, and they line him up on both sides. So it's going to be a test for both tackles. 168 snaps at the left defensive end, 234 snaps at the right defensive end. So he's a guy that truly lines up on both sides of the ball to attack, and really, 6'6". We talked about him in the draft process in 2022, I believe it was. And they need him to come on strong and be the guy that's able to replace Leonard Floyd, who had those 10.5 sacks last year. And Rousseau, he's looked like he was on the way, right? 21, 4 sacks, 22. He had 8 sacks before the injury, and then last year came back, only 5 sacks. So they really need him to step up, because it's I don't want to say make or break. That always sounds, a little over the top, but it's a big year, because are they going to pick up his 5th-year option, right? Or are they going to let him play it out after this year, going into his 4th year? So they got to make that decision, right? So
yeah, that's going to be important, and especially because we have essentially 2 new tackles now. Paris Johnson played last year, but he's playing left tackle now, and you've got Jonah Williams, a guy who in practice hasn't looked impressive, and honestly, people around the league look at Jonah Williams as, while he is a capable starter, he is far from a dominant player, to say the least. And although his some of the metrics improved when he moved from left tackle to right tackle. Some of if you look at Pro Football Focus, the pressure and sack numbers still are underwhelming to say the least.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like you said, it's going to be important for them to see if what they have in a guy that they paid, decent starter money to, that's coming off an interesting year for him, and we'll see how it goes against like we said, a top 5 scoring defense last year.
One other one to look at, and that is, I think it's on both sides of the balls. It's the nickel back against the slot receiver. So you get both Greg Dortch against Teron Johnson for the Bills, and then Khalil Shakir, who's perhaps potentially their biggest threat in the passing game among the receivers, against Garrett Williams. Williams, who we feel very good about. The Cardinals also feel really good about, but it'll be interesting to see how those match up. I'm sure Sean Murphy-Bunting will probably stick to one side. It depends whether he's going to be against Mac Hollins or Curtis Samuel, but Shakir probably will line up mostly against Garrett Williams, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and it should be a fun matchup, and we'll see, how much does Rabbit get in? Does he get in and have a chance with how good he looked in coverage in the preseason, or is it going to just be the guys, they have some trust in early and see how they do? So it'll be interesting to see how everything is deployed.
Coming on next on the Rise of Series podcast, the Star Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on and talk about the part that you guys, I think you all listen for, and that's props and predictions. That's coming next on Rise of Red. We're back on the Rise of Red podcast, Star Cardinals talk on the web. So now we go to our predictions and our props. Seth, you finally can promote FanDuel, your favorite way to do it, and I'm looking at both DraftKings and BetMGM as of right now. We'll do the props first and then do our predictions for the end of the game. But on BetMGM, and because DraftKings doesn't have one right now for number of receptions, and I really like this line. And for the receiving props, I think my favorite one is Greg Dortch over 3.5 catches at plus 130. If he's going to be in that new slot role, that Rondell Moore role, they're going to manufacture he's going to get 4 to 5 touches, or he's going to get 4 to 5 catches, I think, guaranteed, especially the way that Kyler loves Greg Dortch. And so I think that's especially with the plus 130, that's a really nice, safe and profitable bet there.
And you said it was what now? Over 3.5?
Over 3.5 at plus 130.
Okay, so on FanDuel, that's at plus 164. You do have to go to his alt receptions and pick 4 plus. So so that's a great one, Jess, and that's one of those where I look at and I ladder things, and so I think I talked a little bit about this. So if you're going to go 4, I would go 5 as well. You get that at plus 310. If you put 10 on one, put 5 on the other, and you come out ahead no matter what, or you have a really nice day. That's one I like. And the other one that I like in that same vein is I like Michael Wilson to record a 20-plus yard reception. I don't know what his numbers themselves are going to be like, but he's the guy that I think is going to be the kind of intermediate down the field type of guy, where Dortch is the short intermediate guy, and then Marvin's used at all levels, like Trey. So I like that. That's at plus money as well in the passing. Rushing, just one of my favorite ones, and it's okay juice wise. It's minus 106, but I like James Cook over 14.5 rush attempts. I mean, unless the Cardinals have just completely fixed their defense, you have to assume the Bills are going to try to run the football, right?
Right. So, yeah, and you can do some nice I like that for James Cook. You've got, once you hit 70 plus on DraftKings, it's plus 140.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah.
And let me see it. What is it?
'Cause-
75 plus for James. So 75 plus on BetMGM is plus 145. I like how much do you feel? How much confidence do you feel in? We talked about the rushing game because you can get on BetMGM 75 plus rushing yards for James Conner at plus 240.
I like that. I mean, I think it's going to be kind of what they do still. I think Connor over 70 yards or 75 is a good number. I know his over unders at 55.5, but I feel like that seems a little low after last season.
Right. It just depends on how things go. Now you go in the passing. So let's talk about. Oh, okay. This is just your straight up one. You've got Josh Allen over half an interception at minus 110. That's pretty basic type things. Based on his last two season openers. Let's take a look at 250. You get plus odds at 250 plus passing yards on BetMGM on the alternate passing yards, plus 155 for Kyler, plus 100 for Josh Allen. You willing to go up? You willing to go as high as that for the alternate passing yards?
Yeah, and you look at it, the one I like for both of these guys is, and again on FanDuel, they have their alt passing plus rushing total. So like they combine it. And so for Kyler plus 275 or 275 plus, sorry, is even money. So plus 100. I like that number because I feel like, 260, 250 passing yards and 25 rushing yards seems like, I don't want to say a lock because it's never a lock, but it seems like if they're going to have success in the day and be competitive, right, he needs to have something in that vein.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Allen at 300 plus seems fairly like a good bet too. I mean, we talked about his struggles, but it's never been to produce yardage in the first game. It's just that he seems to have some turnover proneness in those first games. Last year he had 236 and 36, so over 270 in that number. So against a worse defense, because that Jets defense again was very good last year. I like the plus 300 number in that sense.
One of your favorites, the kicking props. Guess what they have for Matt Prater over 1.5 field goals?
Ooh, what is it?
Plus 135 on BetMGM.
Oh yeah, I'm taking that one all the way. They don't have that'll be the one thing I have to figure out. They do not have kicking props right now on FanDuel. They might go late on those.
DraftKings actually has it a little bit better. It's Matt Prater over 1.5 is plus 140 on DraftKings. So that's that. If you're shopping around and you've got all your different apps, if you want the kicking prop, then DraftKings is the best option there at the plus 130, plus 140. That is for over 1.5 field goals. I don't know about Tyler Bass. You get over, well, even you get over, you get even odds. You get even money at Tyler Bass for over 1.5. So you get plus 100 on over 1.5 field goals, and then even money plus 100 on over 7.5 kicking points. Neither one on the extra points is good. Matt Prater is minus 200 on over 1.5 extra points. Although, if you believe in the Buffalo defense, you can get plus 154 on the under 1.5 extra points made for Prater. So that's more for the Bills fans, right?
Right, exactly.
So we're not feeling real good about this game. If that's actually not necessarily true, because the Cardinals might score 3 touchdowns and only attempt 1 extra point if we go by Jonathan Gannon's way, right?
Correct.
So that's ones to consider. That's a long shot there, but you want to throw $1 or $2 on that. If you're looking at where are the sacks? Sack props. Oh, I was looking at sacks earlier. Just a second. So Justin Jones over a quarter sack at plus 250. Dennis Gardeck at plus 290. They don't have many sack props. Those are the only two Cardinals that are listed, but you get Ed Oliver at plus 135 for over a quarter sack, Greg Rousseau plus 135, Daquan Jones plus 200, and Terrell Bernard at plus 270 to record at least half a sack. I'd be willing to throw a few dollars on Justin Jones based on what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the strongest one right now. The FanDuel lines are not up yet.
And again, those lines are on DraftKings. We are not, by the way, this is why we're talking about all the sports books, because none of them are paying us. So we're just spending our money. We're
right.
We are making them money, or hopefully we're making you money on using whatever. But we have no agreement with any sports book. So find the best deal. When it comes down to the final the game prop, the game bets, where you go Cardinals, you're making our predictions, Cardinals or Bills, who covers, and then what do you think the total will go? This is my prediction. Now, on the previous show, Nick Woughton predicted a 28-17 Buffalo win, which would be a win, a cover, and an under win for the total. I believe it'll be higher scoring, and I've got the Cardinals losing 30-24, but that would be a cover at the plus 6.5 and going over the 47.5 point projected total. Seth, what do you have for this game?
Yeah, so again, the FanDuel line is 6.5, so that's moved since Monday. That's moved a full point, which is interesting. I have the Cardinals covering that, but same as Jess, losing outright. And I'm going to go 31-28 Bills win. So I am also taking the over in this one, which on FanDuel is 47.5 and is at minus 102. So
that's you get a little bit better value on that, because I think it is on BetMGM. It's the over you get at minus 105, which is nearly the same.
Yeah, so not worth stressing yourself out over.
I mean, if you're already going to be messing around with different sports books, have at it. But that will wrap up episode 485 of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. My goodness, we will have. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week. So we'll be back on our regular schedule next week. Hopefully we're talking about a Cardinals win, or at least a Cardinals exciting game when we come back next week. We'll have 2 to 4 shows, 2 to 3. We will do 2 shows. Hopefully I have one to preview with Cam DeSilva over at the Rams Wire, and then we'll see what Howard does on his side of things. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Rook. We're going for the Cardinals this week. Let's go. Let's get the season started. We'll be back again soon. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.
Roll!